and they're my pets and something to keep me occupied.
Okay, well, I know people are still joining us, but I don't want to waste anybody's time. So, um, Kata Sandoval, Deputy Secretary Sandoval, is with us, and I know that we have a lot of questions that we have for her. So, Kata, did you and and William Hood just asked me a great question that we've got to make sure we add to the list about numbers and 40-day counts and program participation. So how do you want to do it? Do you have like a little presentation you want to do first, or do you want to just do questions and answers, or whatever you would like to do? That's how we'll work it.
Okay, awesome, Mary. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, it's a short PowerPoint. I promise I think gives a good overview of two things. One is the Extended Learning Time Program, and the second is Senate Bill 40, which really affects a lot of districts in terms of participation in the program and what the options are. So if we do that, Mary, it'll take, I would say 7 to 10 minutes max on the PowerPoint, and then we could just have a conversation. Does that work?
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, I'm gonna try to share my screen. Let's see. There it is. Okay, you guys see it? Extended learning time. Okay,
yes,
great.
We can see it. Right. Thank you.
So I'm in full transparency. I'm very low on my tech skills. I'm working on it. And so I am trying to just go to the next slide, but I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. There it is. Okay. So Extended Learning Time Program. Many of you probably work in districts that have already been participating in the Extended Learning Time Program. It's a brand new program. So we'll come back to K5 Plus because you all probably know that our state has had K3 Plus for a long time. Now we're at the point where it's K5 Plus, and we can definitely talk more about that program. K5 is actually a program that's going to come under my team because K5 and Extended Learning Time Program usually work very closely together, hand in hand. So that program will be coming into my shop, which we're excited about. But the program that I know most about is Extended Learning Time. It's a brand new program through the state. We are currently in its second year of implementation, entering the third year, and it's been very popular among districts. And so I'll go through kind of how and why, right, the program was begun and where we're at now. So the purpose, according to statute, and speaking to legislators and the LESC in particular, is really to offer additional instructional days. There's really three program requirements according to the law. One is you need to add additional days to your calendar, and we'll get into the details about how many and when they have to be offered. The second requirement is that schools who opt into the program need to offer an after-school program, which many of our schools already do, especially middle school and high school. What we have found is that elementary schools that opt into the program, for many of them, this is the very first time that they're actually offering after school programming at the elementary level. Clayton is an example. Clayton District, when they participated in this program, they said, we're really excited because this is the first time that we're able to offer after school programming at the elementary level. They've been offering it at secondary. And then the third program requirement is professional development and professional learning, which of course our districts and schools are already doing. Statute requires that it has to be at least 80 hours. And we'll talk about what counts towards those 80 hours in this presentation. Okay, so here's the history. The first 2 years of implementation, the very first year was 2 years ago, school year 2019-2020. we had, and this is still to this day, an opt-in program. It's not mandatory. It's funded through the SEG, meaning that districts who opt in, they get money starting in July to pay, because they've got to pay teachers, they have to pay the cafeteria workers, bus drivers, because it's like regular school, it's just for additional time. So they have all of that expense. So if a school says, yes, we want to do extended learning time program, they get additional money. So the very first year we had about 83,000 students, a little bit more, participate. And to give you a sense, in our state, we have, and Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, about 320,000 students total, K-12. So 83,000 of the 320,000 participated the very first year. Last year, we saw that increase to 141,000 students currently participating in the program this year. And that should say school year, it says AY. But as of today, because we're already, school districts, superintendents, they're submitting their instructional calendars for next year, their budgets for next year, we're already at 243,000 students. And we anticipate it's going to grow even more. So it's a very popular program. And I work in the presentation, I'll give some examples as to why, at least why, according to superintendents, it's very popular. So the first requirement is after school opportunities. An after school program needs to be offered. Students don't necessarily have to participate, but it has to be offered to all students. The good news is the legislature also appropriated money for what we're calling a late bus. So we know that many of our students, right, need to go home right after school, which means that they may not be able to participate in those after school programs. However, we're very fortunate because the legislature gave additional money to say if a school opts into extended learning time, they can run a late bus. And that would be for students who want to stay after school and do the programs, and then they could take the late bus home. So that's been a very important equitable mechanism that's important to PED, and we continue to advocate for that. But students need to make sure it's not just the students who parents can take them home, right, and pick them up, but that it's for all of our students. And the statute says that these programs cannot supplant existing programs that are federally funded. So for example, many of our districts participate in out of school time or the 21st Century Grant. That's an example of federal money. So they can't say, well, we're just gonna take this money and pay for these programs. It's like, let's expand, let's give more opportunity to our students if you're already getting the 21st Century Grant. And then the second requirement is professional development. And schools who opt into the program need to provide a minimum of 80 hours of professional development to staff. And so this is for all staff at the school site and PLCs that many of our teachers are already participating in, that counts. So we want to take in-service days, PLC time, staff meetings, department meetings, everything that we know our teachers are already participating in, that counts towards the 80 hours. And then we tell superintendents and districts, you need to provide that development. If you're only at 40 hours with all of that, then you need to make sure you're giving that time and opportunity to teachers within their contractual day to be able to participate in more professional development. And then the third and final requirement is additional instructional days. And so if you work at a 5-day week district, they interpret, again, according to the law, you would either have to have a total of 190 instructional days. So most of our 5-day week districts have 180, right? So they would have to go up 10 days to 190, or many of our 5-day districts may have 177, 176. So they would not necessarily have to add additional 13 or 14 days. They would just have to add the 10. So whichever is fewer. If you have 177 days, you would only have to add 10 days and be at 187. If you have currently 182 days, you would only have to add 8 more days to get to 190. So again, it's whichever is the fewer amount of days, those districts would be funded and meet this program requirement. If it's a district with a 4-day week, then it's proportional. So instead of 10 additional days, it's 8 additional days. Same kind of idea. You either have to have a total of 160 days or an additional 8 days, whichever is fewer. And that's for extended learning time, and that's available for all students, kindergarten through 12th grade. And so I think one of the reasons that it became very popular is the first year, it was created to be extremely flexible, and PED did that with intentionality because we wanted the program to really meet the needs of districts and schools. So for example, we had some high schools that said, okay, we're going to do extended learning time, but only for our 9th graders, because we want time with them to have them come in and meet their teachers, kind of go through and know the campus before the older kids get there, right? And we had middle schools do the same. They wanted to use these additional days just for their incoming 6th graders. So very flexible. And teachers, we heard from the schools that participated in this program, were able to really take ownership of those days and do things, project-based learning, for example, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, do certain things instructionally that they felt like they didn't necessarily have time for in the regular school year. And so it became a very popular program. And I'll talk about SB 40 in just a minute and where the program is now. K-5 plus schools can stack the program. So if you have a K-5 plus school who says, okay, we're going to do our K-5 days, and we also want to do extended learning, they don't have to do a total of 35 days, right? That would be 25 K-5 and then 10 more. We said you can do equivalent hours. So right now, if you're doing both programs as an elementary school, you would do your 25 additional days, and then the 10 additional days for extended learning, you could do by extending each instructional day. So all 205 days for 5-day weeks, enough so that you would accumulate the equivalent of 10 days over time. And they would still be funded, those districts, so that they could do the after school programming, pay their teachers at the appropriate rate, and also provide the professional development. Senate Bill 40. So let's talk about this a little bit. This is important because it impacts next school year. So this was approved by the legislature, signed by the governor. And what it says is that it requires districts and charters to either opt into one or both programs or opt out of both. And if they do opt out of both, they have to submit a plan to PED that says, we're not going to do these programs. Instead, this is how we're going to address what, and I'm quoting kind of the language in the statute that says instructional loss or learning loss due to the pandemic. So PED is collecting those plans from districts, and then we, in turn, according to Senate Bill 40, have to submit those plans to the Legislative Education Study Committee, the LESC, and the Legislative Finance Committee, the LFC. So we will collect those plans, review them, and then also provide them to both of those legislative bodies. So I think the intent from the legislature is making sure that our schools have the resources through both of these programs to provide additional time for students to come back in person, to really attend to their social emotional needs, their learning needs. And then for those schools who don't want to do that, then they would say, here's what we're doing instead. In addition to that, it also provided program flexibilities for K-5. And so the legislature really looked at, here's a new program, extended learning time, that's very popular, growing in participation. Here's the other program, K5, that our state has had for some time, and the participation numbers were going down. So they were very interested to see how K5 could become more, just have more participation across the state. And so part of Senate Bill 40 provided similar flexibilities to K5 as it has to extended learning. So for example, K5, for those of you who've done K3 in the past or K5, it was very strict. You had to do the 20 or the 25 days before the first day of school. You had to make sure that the cohort of students stayed with the same teacher. That's gone. So now the Senate Bill 40 says, if you do K5, you can add 25 days for 5-day weeks or 20 days for 4-day weeks. So that was a flexibility there. And they said those additional 20 or 25 days can be done at any time. So you might do 10 days at the beginning of August, and then maybe you do the remaining days at the end of May or June. Or 4-day weeks are saying, okay, we want to do some of our K5 days on every other Friday or one Friday a month. But it's flexible. It's up to each district when to calendar those days. It doesn't necessarily, again, have to be at the beginning of the school year. It also says that if to the greatest extent possible, right, we do want to keep the cohort of students with the same teacher, but that's something else PED explained to them. There are teachers who that's time for them to be with their families, or they have, other obligations in the summer. We have teachers who might be on maternity leave. There's a whole variety of reasons, right? The teachers may not be able to commit to those additional days. So that's another flexibility they added to the law to say, if we can have Miss Kata with her group of students for K5 and throughout the year, awesome. But if I can't be with them, then there could be, Mary can come in for those days in the summer, and then I can pick up during the regular school day. So that's another flexibility that they added to the law this year. Okay, let me keep going here. And then stacking both programs at the same school. So we know that some of our elementaries, most of them are K5, but we also have many K6 schools and even K8 schools. So the statute does allow all 3 types of schools to participate in the K5 plus program if they want to, and they would get full funding. So that way you don't have just kinder through 5th grade doing one thing and then the middle school students at the same school site doing something else. It's meant to be for the entire school. And so that's also allowed for next school year. And then again, you would have, if you did both programs, then you would have to make sure that each instructional day throughout the school year is a little bit longer. It's either 5.8 hours or 6.9 hours, depending if you're a 5-day week or a 4-day week. And again, that's how you would make the 10 days or the 8 days over time. After school programming for all students, 80 hours of PD. Some of the PD, again, if you're K5 plus school, must be on how young children learn to read, right? That's the intent of the program, is really helping develop the early literacy skills of students from kinder to 3rd grade. Good faith attempt, like I talked about, of keeping students with the same teacher, but it's not required. And then this is the biggest one for both programs. The program must be implemented school-wide. So meaning that if you opted into the program, it used to be cohort-based before, right? You'd have like a strand where some of the students at a school could do the K5, or some of the students could do extended. Senate Bill 40 now says, if you do these programs, it has to be school-wide. What that means is if, for example, if you have an elementary school that says, okay, we're gonna do K5 elementary school-wide, of course, there's gonna be some students and families who don't attend those extra days. What does that mean? It just means that those students would be counted absent like any other school day. The Attendance for Success Act applies So they would be counted as absent. They would have to get the necessary interventions required, by the Attendance for Success Act, but the district would still be funded, because we know that districts still need to pay teachers. They still need to pay their cafeteria workers. So they would not be penalized for those students who didn't attend those additional days. And then program highlights, and we did speak to Senator Stewart, who was the sponsor of Senate Bill 40, to really get her input and thoughts about the intent of the law and the program flexibilities. And she goes, Kata, we want these additional days to be contextualized, to be rooted in the strengths of the community. So she said it could be outdoor learning, project-based learning, experiential ed, STEM programs, and that it really is owned by the teachers and the staff. And so I'll give a couple of examples. Cobre is a perfect example. When they did extended learning time, excuse me, a couple of years ago, they designed the program so that the additional 10 days were based on the forestry service. They partnered with US Forestry and the mines. And so students during those 10 days went out into the forest around the mines. They then it was a STEM program where they designed and programmed drones. And the drones would go and take pictures of the forest around the mines. And then they actually flew into the mines themselves and took pictures and mapped out the mines. So that's one example of how their program had a very specific feel and a very specific focus that wasn't necessarily in the classroom. And so we want to encourage that for both programs now. So that, for example, we've been in conversation with many of our districts that serve a high population of Native students, right? So we've heard from tribal ed directors, they said, well, the summer we're in feast, right? We've got feast days. A lot of our students and staff are out dancing, they're participating in feast. And I said, that's awesome. Continue that. Could you build a program where those students and staff are still participating in feast, but maybe there's a project that after they participate, they come back and they report out, they research the history of feast, of the saint that they're celebrating, that their pueblo is named after. So that's one example. Another example, we've been in conversation with districts in Dairyland, a lot of the eastern part of the state. Superintendent Kata, our kids are going to be at the county fair, right? They're going to be doing a lot of 4-H activities. Awesome. Same kind of idea. Let the students, let the staff be out doing those things that is part of their culture and community. And could you build a program or a project based around what they're already doing, so that they're outside, they're doing things that we want them to do, that's based in the traditions, right, of the communities that they live in. So I wanted to share that because we have been really promoting that with our superintendents and our districts to say, use this as an opportunity to give ownership to your teachers to try things they've always wanted to do, but maybe haven't had time to do. And those things are okay. It doesn't have to be, a traditional school day with that we normally think of, right, of school, but that it's very much based on the community and its strengths. And Mary, that's all. I'll pause there and just pause for questions.
Okay, so I have a few questions to get us started, and then I would ask that maybe put questions in the chat, and then we can call on you to unmute and ask your question. And Dean, did you wanna, let's go to your question first, and will you ask that question? Because it had to do with members, right? And membership and 40th day counts, and you're muted.
Greg will recognize this question. And Greg, I'm asking this because I think what I'm getting from the district is slightly different than what we've talked. So I wanted to ask Pat about this. So if you buy into either one of these two programs, the ELT Plus or the K5 Plus, okay, are you allowed to count your membership for your, for your SEG on last year's numbers?
Thank you for that question. Yes. And so yes and yes. So let me explain that a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's the entire school, right? And with the way PED runs SCG anyway, right? So it's previous year MEM, as you know, 80 and 120 average. We told superintendents, go ahead and enter your 80, 120 average, and we'll confirm that because fiscal has all of those numbers. Or if it's a new program, right, you can project just like we would any other program for bilingual, for example, fine arts programs. So we're using the system that we've always had for membership, but the short answer is yes, William, that they would use their average of 80, 120 from current year, and that would be what they would be funded for next year. And then we would do a true up at 40th day.
Okay, but on the 40th day, you're going to kind of, those numbers can change, right?
That's right. It's the normal process where districts currently get funded on their membership. So they get a projected membership projection for their district. So same kind of thing. We would say, okay, if you're participating in ELTP for all of your schools at your district, then you would get the additional funding. And then at 40th day, when districts report, if they're higher than what they had projected, then we give them additional money, just like we would any other SEG true up. And then if they've lost enrollment, same thing, they would be adjusted accordingly.
Okay, so at 40th day, if they don't, if they haven't maintained the numbers and numbers are lower, then it would be adjusted thereafter, the SEG amount based on the numbers reported on the 40th day, correct? Is that what you just said? Okay,
Yeah.
just want to make sure I understand.
So your initial equalization formula is going to be based off the numbers from this current school year.
Yep, 80, 120 average. That's right.
Okay, so let me go to some questions. So this is like what I hear a lot, Kata. So how important does the New Mexico PED believe it is for districts to work with students, families, and staff on the design and programming of extended learning time and K5 plus? And if a district is not working with their stakeholders in making these plans, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me start with the first part. We at PED have really been messaging with our superintendents. The presentation that I just shared with you is a presentation that I've shared with superintendents, right? That these are programs that are optional, should be tailored, designed by the teachers in the district, their leadership, and the community to say, what would we do with this additional time that would better meet the needs of our students? So that has been our message. We're also planning mid to late May, a convening that would be just specific to these two programs, where participating districts would attend, and we would have particular like breakout sessions where they learn from each other. And this is where we encourage, and we had one a couple of years ago when we first launched, and it was great because, for example, Cobre was there with their teachers, with their team to say, here's what we did, here's how we handled it. They had a video of the mines and the drone program. And then they had district teams, because we do say you have to bring in district teams that includes teachers and not just district leadership, but also teachers who would come in and they would attend and listen. and learn from each other. And so we're going to design another convening like that in mid-May, where district teams are learning from each other and sharing best practices and building off of ideas. And we want to have a thread that's specific to schools and districts that, like I mentioned before, that are serving primarily Native students. And so we're working with our Indian Ed department to co-create that. Another strand would be for districts and schools that are on, on dairy farms and dairy lands. And so that, again, they're learning from each other, and hopefully thinking of a program that's going to really best meet their needs. If they are not doing that, in other words, they're not engaging with their communities, or they're just so you know, PED does say district teams need to bring in a teacher representative for convenings like that. But if they're just not doing it in general, I would encourage you to reach out to your principal, to district leadership, to say, I understand that we've opted into these programs, and we would love to participate. You can use me and say, we had a presentation from PED that said teachers should be involved in designing the theme of these days. Happy to support you with that, because that has been our message to superintendents.
Yes, I know that's been your message to superintendents, which is why I'm always so surprised when I'm not really surprised, but I do get a lot of different input from my local leaders that are here with us tonight. So these are our hardworking local presidents and bargaining teams, and also our NEA New Mexico staff is here, and our executive director, Dr. Earl Wyman. So, so Carolyn is asking about the daily rate of pay. So I know that that is something that the legislature has been very adamant about. Is that written into this? It is. I don't know if the daily rate of pay language is written in, but that is an expectation, correct?
That's correct. In fact, I confirmed with our policy team that for staff and schools who are doing the extended learning time program, it should be about a 6% increase to participate. In other words, staff who are doing that should get 6% again at their daily rate. And then for K-5, it should be 14% at your daily rate to participate in those programs. So yes, that is definitely an expectation that all staff who are participating in these programs are paid appropriately at their daily rate that they would for any other day. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's what districts are getting funded, correct, is to pay staff at the daily rate of pay. Okay, and I know, well, let me stick to the questions and then we'll get to some of the some other things. So if a district that currently has 190, and I think one of the areas of misunderstanding possibly is that in some collectively bargained agreement, there may be 183 days, but like 10 of those days may be non-student instruction days. So the days have to be student instructional days. And we're trying to get with the ELT up to 90 days, is that correct? So if, let's say that they are at, right now that a district has 185 student instructional days in their calendar, would they only have to add 5 instructional days to get the ELT money?
Yes. So as long as they're instructional days, so if you have 185 instructional days currently, you would only have to add 5 more to get to the 190. That's right. And you'd get fully funded. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I think there's a kind of an in-depth question about how the programs work together, the stacking of programs and the language in House Bill 2. And so how is it different from past years? Can you talk to us about that?
Could you give me a little bit more context in terms of how are the programs different, or how is what different from past years?
So how is the funding? So I think there's confusion around the hours. So and there's a belief that I know that there's a minimum requirement for hours in SB 40, but most school districts that I know are already over that minimum amount of hours. Because I think SB 40 says what for kids in 7 through 12, it has to be like a 6.5 hour day or something, and most districts are over that. So, you know, I think what I'll do is just have Greg ask the question, because there's a lot of different variations to this question. So Greg, if you'll unmute and ask her the question.
Good evening. Thank you, President. Good evening, Deputy Secretary. The question is, in the past, you were able to use your hours when you were doing K-5 plus. It's clear under SB 40 that you can't use hours, you have to use days. But if you stack the program, it was our understanding, and I believe, and actually I'm sitting in Carlsbad's back office because the board and the union are meeting to work this out, and appreciate your help there. But the question is, if you choose to do a stacked program of ELTP and say K-12 plus, are you able to use your hours in the K-12 plus, or do you have to add the 15 extra days, just like you had to do the 10 days? Because here in the Southeast, all the districts are teaching to a 7.5 or 7.45 day.
Okay, good question. So currently, the way statute is written, you can, when you stack the programs, it has to be in a certain way. So the base is K-5. You've got to do the 25 days or 20, right? And then you can do equivalent hours for extended, the 10 days. This session, there is a pilot program. It's funded at $20 million for the next 2 fiscal years. It's below the line. It was sponsored by Representative Romero from Albuquerque. And this is what I call the reverse stack pilot. So the legislature is very interested to see if we were to reverse stack it, meaning you still stack both programs, but instead of doing the 25 first, you do the 10 days and then the 25 equivalent hours. Does that have any effect, right, on attendance, on academics, or is the net effect the same? So the legislature is very interested in seeing if equivalent hours have the same effect, worse or better, rather than days, number of days. Now it's a pilot, so we're very interested in interested districts who, there's an application that just opened last Thursday, and they can apply. It's a very simple application. And it closes, gosh, I'm losing, I think I want to say April 30th. And so we definitely are going to be taking, from a research perspective, a representative sample of districts, right? Urban, rural, different parts, geographical parts of the state. So we need to wait and see how many districts apply, but I can tell you already, there's lots of interest. I've heard from a lot of districts that they want to apply, they're interested. And I think it's what the feedback PED has received with these 2 programs is that 10 days is a lot more palatable and agreeable to their communities at large, parents, right, families, staff. 10 days is easier versus 25. And so I think that's why the legislature has said, okay, let's go ahead and invest in and research this. And depending on the outcomes, we might see ourselves in a place where you can do equivalent hours for either program. Does that
So now I
answer-
understand that question a little better. I'm sorry, Kata, go ahead.
I just want to check with Greg. Does that address your question? I'm not sure if it does, but wanted to pause there.
It does, and we'll continue to work with this district. The union will collaborate, continue to work the district to implement that program based on the short of time. Madam President, if I can I ask a clarifying question in regards to Mr. Hood's question, President Hood's question? Because Deputy Secretary, we're receiving a little bit of conflicting information from budget analysts. And that has to do with the hold harmless provision in House Bill 2. We know that the PED did a great job of building in a hold harmless in the initial SEG estimates that went out. We know you've already heard from the superintendents, such as Dr. Washburn, that feel their SEGs are incorrect. The problem is, and where the miscommunication is if on the 40th day there's that decrease in enrollment, they're under the impression that they're still held harmless because they participated in the program. Your statement tonight is that not only can you allow for unit growth of 1%, which we all know, if you have 1%, you automatically get the growth for the rest of the remainder of your monthly statements or monthly allotments to the districts. But you're indicating tonight that there could be a decrease in the monthly allotment moving forward past the 40th day, and that's not been our understanding. Is that?
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Greg, because I just realized that during my entire presentation tonight, I did not even think of the hold harmless provision or mention it. So let me, and I don't want to misspeak. I know that Deputy Secretary Delgado and Secretary Stewart have been really communicating about, is it all parts of SEG, right? For example, if we had a district that currently this year participated in ELTP, but is opting out next year, right? Would the hold harmless provision apply to that part? Because it's part of the SEG. They're working out all of those details, and we'll send out a confirmed memo. But you're right, Greg, that I have not even mentioned that. So what I can do is go back to Secretary and the team and make sure, let them know, they know that I'm meeting with you tonight, and I'll take that back as a question. So please don't quote me on that because they're still working out the details. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Deputy Secretary. That's the critical question that we need answered as we move through the budget cycle and the bargaining cycle. Thank you, Madam President. Yield back to you.
Okay, great. So I have a clarifying question around the reverse stacking. So I just want to make sure that if you're not part of the $20 million pilot that you have to apply to be a part of, then hours are not going to be part of the equation. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the only time hours can count is if you stack both programs and you implement the K5 days. So you would have to still do your either 20 or 25 days and then extend each day a little bit more to do the equivalent of the 10 days of ELTP.
Okay.
But if you're
So
doing
how much would you have to extend it?
I don't want to misquote. That was the 5. Let me get those.
So if you're already over those minimums, does that count as?
You're
Okay.
already there. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're going to do K5 plus, the district would be smart to also apply for the ELT money, because you can build it in if your hours are already greater than the minimum number, which most school districts are already over those hours, the minimum hours. So that makes now it makes more sense to me where that was coming from. So
Yep, that's right.
So, okay. So here, is there some public notice requirement that districts must give to parents when drastically changing the school calendar for the upcoming year. So this is a problem that is happening in real time, where the school district has made a unilateral top-down decision to ask, well, they had staff voting between two calendars. Both calendars start like a full month earlier than what they've ever started before in the history of the school district. And many staff are reeling because, you know, they have surgeries planned, or they've got weddings, or, you know, all the myriad things that people with large families do off in their off contract time. So the same will be true for parents and families, that if, you know, now in late April, a district is saying we're going to start school July 7th for school year 21-22, is there any noticing requirement that a district must or should give to parents before pulling something like that? For lack of a better way to say it.
Great question. I don't know if there is a statutory requirement. I'm happy to circle back on that. I'm taking my notes here. I'll circle back with Dr. Hand and our policy team about that. Definitely a best practice, right? I mean, they should definitely be involving their community, their parents and families in the development of a calendar, especially when it is dramatically different and a departure from previous calendars. I just honestly don't know if there are any statutory requirements, but I'll circle back on that, Mary.
And I appreciate that. Deputy Secretary Sandoval is also heads up the community school programming at New Mexico PED. So Deputy Secretary, will you tell us the programs that you oversee?
Sure.
At the Public Ed Department, just so people will know.
Sure. Okay, broad strokes. K-5 extended learning time, out of school time, including the 21st Century Grant, community schools, all the USDA programs, so breakfast and lunch, as well as like breakfast after the bell. Oh, good news. The federal waivers came out, and New Mexico is going to opt in so that our students across the state can eat for free again next year, similar to this year. So we just got hold of that from USDA. And so anyways, sorry, I got sidetracked. That's one of my teams.
No, that's good. That is good news.
Yeah. Farm to table. So for those of you who have, you know, New Mexico fresh fruit and grown vegetables, so our food program, Priority Schools Bureau with so schools that have federal designations, TSI and CSI. I also have all the COVID toolkit. So Safe and Healthy Schools, we interface a lot with the state's medical advisory team and the epidemiologists, who are wonderful doctors, but they're doctors. And so a lot of their guidance, a lot of my time and my team's time is interfacing with them and negotiating to say, that's great guidance, but we have to take that back to our schools and operationalize that. And they just don't have that context, right? They're not teachers. They don't understand how schools operate. So, but we developed the toolkit. There's going to be an updated toolkit coming out this week. So all like the testing surveillance program, PPE, anything to do with COVID safe practices is on my team as well. The teens, the grads program for young parents is also part of ours. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I'm making sure I'm not. Oh, and Title I.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, so let me ask you this question. Were schools So Betty, why don't you unmute and I don't know if it's a question or it's more of a comment. And it seems like I just can't imagine that a district would do this, but if you say so. So tell us what you put in the chat, Betty, please.
The districts that I work with actually change the end of the year so that instead of students getting out May 21st, they're getting out June 7th. And they just sent out notices to the parents saying that we're changing this. Their graduation is still the same day, but everyone else will be mainly elementary, but one district gets everyone. But the one district gets elementary, that they will be getting out June 7th instead of May 21st.
And Betty, it sounds like the district just informed the community recently about that.
Yes, yes. And they said, be sure and see our new revised calendar because our days have changed and our days for next year are different.
Huh. The only thing I can think of is that these are districts who applied for and have approved programs for either extended learning or K-5. But the district would have known about that and would have submitted their approved calendar last year. So they would have had all this time with their board to approve it and inform their staff and community. If that's not the case, I agree with Mary. I would love to chat with you more about it offline and do some research because that should not happen right now. It would have to have been, they submitted their instructional calendar at budget season a year ago and would have received appropriate funding. In other words, from a program side, we didn't open up another window to participate in programs mid-year. It would have happened a year ago.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that is one of the biggest issues. I think many teachers, it's been a really tough year for educators, given all of the roller coaster rides that they've had with schools opening and closing and having to learn to do their job in a completely different modality, and then getting kids settled into that, and then going partially hybrid, and then full in person, and then we still have a number of kids that are choosing to stay remote. So it's been tough on educators. And now I think we do have some superintendents that are not working with their staff and the communities as well as they could be, because when you do things like what Betty just said, the other people that haven't planned for that are parents. So yeah, staff is up in arms about it, but also parents. And so there's a very good chance you won't have the attendance that you would like to have because you have waited until the 11th hour to notify parents. And we've got to quit doing things like that. As an education entity that cares about students and families. And also if we don't include, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that if we don't ask students and families, what they'd like to see the school add, like, in a 4-H community, for example, or we used to have ag science class because I taught at a school that was in the middle of a ranching field where kids, showed animals at the fair, and that's what they wanted to do. And so we offered agricultural science as an option. And that is, those are the programs that parents and the community will rally around when it's rooted in the values and of the community. But when we just spring things, like we have a whole district that are telling staff and the community, like I said, that school's going to start on July 7th. And it would be okay if they knew that back in May when they sign, their it's like, it's just not good business for anybody to wait this late in the game. So
yeah, I appreciate that. So go ahead, Mary.
No, I'm finished. Go ahead.
No, I just, two things. One, from my perspective at the PED, and I think Secretary Stewart would agree, we definitely have been messaging and will continue to message out to districts that these programs are, again, meant to build off the strengths of our communities. They should consult with their families and their staff to make sure that this is something collectively that they buy into and support. The deputies, my fellow deputies and I have good working relationships with the superintendents that we have been developing for the past 2 years as we've been in this position. And I'm happy to, maybe Mary, if you were to let me know which districts are of most concern, and we would approach it in a way that's collegial and, in a way that to say, hey, want to touch base with you. Very happy you're interested in these programs, but make sure please to involve your communities. So I offer that to all of you. Just we're happy to do that. The deputies, and we've had those. We're used to those kind of critical conversations that are with our superintendents to have that mutual accountability and support. Right, with mutual high support comes high expectations and mutual accountability. So we're used to that, and we're happy to do that.
So thank you, and I really appreciate that. And I know that that is what the PED consistently says. And yet what I hear from educators in districts, that is not what superintendents are saying. So I'm always like, like, whoa, that is very different from what I'm hearing. So I appreciate that. And I guess it's just going to take us working closely with our parents and our communities to figure out what they're ready for, because they've also been pretty traumatized, in the past 1.5 years. And so I think it's going to really not be a one size fits all. And that's what we fought for and were successful at during the legislative session, was to make sure that there was not a one size fits all approach in SB 40 that was pushed out. And we really wanted to see House Bill 184, which was the hours, where you could add in hours and add the time that way. You could just add it either to the school day. And I think that is sometimes could be easier for families because kids are already at school, and then it can apply to more. So these calendar, this is what I was going to ask you, and I think this will be our last question because the hour's already passed. But so SB 40, I know, was really written to be a change to the calendar. So that implies that it is going to be treated like part of the regular school year. These are not summertime programs. It is a change to your calendar. So that is different in the way you would approach your pay. I mean, you wouldn't have to necessarily, bargain to get your daily rate of pay, because it's just adding to your school calendar. So anyway, I think I'm rattling on. So I really want to thank you for braving us after your day of visiting schools, and we may have follow-up questions for you. So I would like to be able to send those to you to just to make sure that we have the correct information moving forward. So really like to thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you to all of you presidents and staff and leaders. And I hope that this has been beneficial for you and that you got some information you can use. So.
Thank you, Mary, for the invitation. Just want to thank everybody on the call today. I've got my homework, and please send me the follow-up questions, Mary, and I'll definitely work with you to follow up and circle back on those questions.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay. Will do. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight.